All right, let me introduce today's speaker, Renita Kalhorn. Renita is an executive coach who's worked with 1,200 plus high performers in more than 40 countries, from Fortune 500 executives to Inc. 5000 entrepreneurs. Tapping more than 10 years of working with special forces and future Navy SEALs, Renita specializes in helping visionary leaders build loyal A-teams and great companies. And as if that wasn't enough, Renita is also a Juilliard-trained concert pianist, has a martial arts black belt, and an INSEAD MBA. Renita is based in New York and Paris. She has lived and worked in Europe and Japan for over a decade and is fluent in Japanese. But she wouldn't have gotten to where she is today without resilience. So who better to teach us about this extremely important skill today? Renita, we're so thrilled to have you with us today. The Zoom stage is yours.
Thank you, Stephanie. I will share my screen. All right, everybody can see that? Excellent.
Looks good.
So even in India, must be the middle of the night there. So let's talk about this, resilience in a VUCA world. So a world that's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Basically everything we experienced starting last year in 2020. So as you heard a little bit about my bio, I want to give you though the backstory of this, because often you see these seemingly impressive bios and you don't see all the work, all the failures, all the disappointments that went into it. So when I was at Juilliard, my piano teacher told me I played like a mouse, and not in a good way. And he asked me if I had thought about going to law school. So eventually I did leave, I decided not to pursue a career in music. I decided to go to business school at INSEAD. But after the first semester, I was at the very bottom of my class. You know, they have that curve, that grading scale. I was at the far end on the wrong side. And then when I graduated, I had no job offers. And so I worked as a temp for a year here in New York City. I did start doing martial arts, but when I got to my black belt test, I didn't break the boards the first time or the second time. It took me 3 more tries and a whole year until I finally broke the boards and got my martial arts black belt. And meanwhile, I was working in startups and in business development and general management, and I got laid off at least three times. I started working as a director of a not-for-profit right around the time of 9/11. So I'm trying to fundraise for this not-for-profit right after 9/11. And then when I started my coaching business, I realized I didn't really know how to sell. And so for 2 years, I sold health insurance, dealing with all kinds of rejection that goes along with sales. So I know a little bit about resilience and how to bounce back and how to, what it's like to be the black sheep and deal with pivoting and changing course. So I want to share some of that with you today. But what I really want to present this in or focus this in is what's going on in the world, because 10 or 15 years ago, even, the world felt much more stable and certain. We had visibility into the future, or at least we thought we did. But the past year has really shown us what a VUCA world is like. And so the secret to life, it's not to get better at planning and predicting and trying to control things. It's actually to get better at addressing those unexpected challenges as they come. So to become better at riding the bike, it is, in a sense. So instead of trying to avoid disappointment and failure, learn to bounce back quicker. Instead of being afraid to make the wrong decision and second guessing yourself, just learn to commit to a decision and make it the right decision. And instead of resisting change, just become more agile and adaptable. So you may be wondering, well, okay, how do you do that? And that's where I'd like to see if I can share some information with you today to help you. So what we're going to start by is talking about being in survival mode, which a lot of us are probably in at this point. And then I want to share with you a methodology around the fast triggers. And we'll do a little quiz then to see if it's landing for you. And then at the end, I'll share with you a 3-part resilience strategy that you can make your own. So let's just start with a quick poll so I can kind of see where you're at. On a scale of 1 to 10. So 1, you're on a beach drinking margaritas, and 10, you're on a beach running from a tsunami. What would you say is your average stress level over the last 2 weeks?
Votes are coming in.
Suspense.
Yeah, it's always very exciting because I can see the bars move. Let's see if we have any late. Still some more people voting. I'll be ending the poll in just a second. All right. Let's see. I'll be sharing the results for everyone to see.
Okay. That's what I was kind of guessing, around a 7. It's the most, yeah. Okay, so 4 to 7, a couple of 8s. Cool. All right. Let's see. How do I close that? Do you close that? Yeah, you close it. Okay. So let's talk about survival mode. What does that actually mean? And let's make sure we're on the same page. So I'm going to show a quick video, and I think this information is going to be something you already know. But as you're watching it, see what really sticks out at you, and see if you can crystallize, what this really means to living in a VUCA world. Oh, I don't know if I clicked the. I'm gonna stop. I don't know if I.
Yeah, I think the sound was missing, Renita.
Sound was missing. Yeah.
Yeah, just
Let me
check
get that.
the box next
There
time.
it goes. Okay. Take 2.
Human beings have survived down through the ages because of the body's ability to leap into action when confronted by danger. When confronted by a threat, an alarm bell goes off in your brain, triggering a chain reaction to gear you up for instant action. Adrenaline and cortisol hormones flood into your body, kick-starting the nervous system. Your heart pumps faster to increase the flow of blood to the muscles. Your breathing accelerates to take in oxygen. Muscles tighten, your fists clench. To conserve energy, the digestive and immune systems slow down. To keep the body cool, you start to sweat. You are now ready for physical action. This served our ancestors well. In their charged up state, they could either fight or run away. Hence, the stress response is also known as fight or flight.
Unfortunately, the fight-flight instinct is still with us today. There are still people who become overly aggressive with other people or run away from problems. These are bad coping strategies. In today's world, we can gain control of a lot of things that hit us, and we can think of strategies which are much more effective and much more adaptive.
Okay, so I'm curious to get 2 or 3 responses from any of you. Anything that you kind of connected the dots with that video, or any thoughts you'd like to share? Maybe Chandler, you can let me know what's coming in.
Yeah, you bet. I'm looking at the chat. So they're coming in. Someone said that we have other means to handle stress. Someone said focus on the things you can control and ride the wave.
Nice.
Another, at times I'm overwhelmed with all the tasks. It's so much more helpful to understand the breakdown of stress. It helps with awareness.
Ah, good.
So they're coming in and it keeps like bumping them up now, that the stress response only allows us to do one thing: run, not respond.
Wow. Nice. Cool. Cool. Let's go on from there, because I want to really expand on those. So you guys got it. So here's the first thing to understand is that our brain's number one priority is survival, okay? So we basically have the part of the brain called the amygdala is like the fire alarm of the brain. So it's constantly looking for threats. And when it sees one, it sets off the fire alarm. And you saw all the things that happens. You know, the mouth goes dry, our breathing starts to get very shallow, our heart pounds, palms get sweaty. And have you ever opened your email and had some of this reaction, or gone into a meeting and just kind of noticed these things happening? So here's the thing, our evolutionary ancestors, they had to rely on the fight or flight response. As one of you noted, they didn't have much choice. So they had to just react. They didn't have time to think. But over hundreds and thousands of years now, our brains have evolved and we have the ability to override that fight or flight response and to really just ask ourselves, is my life actually in danger, right? Is this email literally going to kill me? Well, you know, very few of us have actual physical threats in our daily life. We have plenty to eat. Nothing is trying to eat us, but our brain is still looking for threats because it's wired to do that. And so it's seeing threats in our social environment, and it triggers the fight or flight reaction the exact same way it does when there's a physical threat. So here was some learning that really blew my mind when I saw this. So Mother Nature, basically, to keep our ancestors alive, she routinely tricked them into making 3 mistakes. So the first mistake is to overestimate threats. The second is to underestimate opportunity. And the third is to underestimate our resources. So our ability to handle those threats and to take advantage of opportunity. So in survival mode, it's really important to understand that your brain is not being rational. It's just focused on this perceived threat, and it thinks you are going to die. It doesn't matter whether it's an SUV that's coming at you quickly or an email from your client in your inbox. Your brain is still reacting in the same way, okay? Because it's focused on potential threats to safety. So in survival mode, it's not a time for growth or to be creative. It's not a time to have compassion, to be kind, to be curious, and to say, oh, let me think about this. The brain is very narrowly focused in survival. So what I want to talk about today in terms of resilience is how we can evolve past that really primal wiring, that it works in some cases. You know, if there is an actual physical threat to your survival, you want to have a fight or flight reaction. But for most of our lives, there's no real physical threat to our survival. And so that fight or flight reaction isn't appropriate. And so how can we override that? So I have a 3-part methodology to address each of the 3 mistakes. So in order to not overestimate the threats, we need to leverage our neurobiology, so that connection between our brain and body. Get out of autopilot and neutralize those fight or flight reactions. We'll still be having them, but we want to learn how to neutralize them so they don't dictate our behavior. The second mistake, which is underestimating opportunity, we want to burn that mental fat. So all the anxiety and worry about what will happen, what could go wrong, all the second guessing, all this redundant thinking that's not really productive and helping us move towards what we want. And then the final mistake, underestimating our resources. So our ability to really tap into our potential, to develop our emotional intelligence so that we can evaluate risk and adapt to change and manage conflict in a very productive, influential way. Okay, let me just pause quickly there. I don't know if there are any questions coming in.
It's like we don't have any anything in the form of question right now.
Questions.
We can give just a minute to see if anyone wants to go ahead and submit a question right now.
That's okay. I'll keep going.
Okay.
So going back to the biking analogy, it's kind of like before we were on a flat road, maybe with some hills, but we could see things, we knew what was coming. And now it's truly like we're mountain biking. So they're muddy paths. There might not even be a path sometimes. There's going to be lots of trees and it's going to be really slippery. That's the VUCA world we're living in. And so we really need to learn how to get better at riding and managing those unexpected obstacles and changes. So I'm going to focus on today's presentation on the first mistake, overestimating threats and how we can leverage our neurobiology. And we do that by understanding what the FAST triggers are. So FAST stands for future. Can I predict what's going to happen? Autonomy. Do I have control over what I do, how I do it? My status. What's my relative standing vis-a-vis this person or this group? Tribe is, am I part of the group? Can I trust the other people in the group? And then the last T is time. Will I have enough? So these are the FAST triggers, and let me go through each one. So future, I mean, this one has really been huge, particularly in the last year, right? Can I predict what's going to be happening? There's so many things that have been uncertain for us. And here's the thing, the brain loves certainty. The brain wants to be able to predict and control what's going to happen. So because when it can't, it has to use more resources to process what's going on. It can't just be on autopilot and use a past experience to predict what's going to happen. And really, hasn't that been what this past year has been about for many of us? We haven't been in a pandemic. We haven't been in shutdowns and confinements. So there's so much uncertainty involved. And there's actually 3 levels of uncertainty. So there's the macro level, where there's all the political and the economic and the social and the environment level of uncertainties, right, that we don't have control over. Then there's the personal uncertainties in terms of your business. You know, are you going to be able to make payroll? Are you going to get that PPP loan? Your career, you know, is it still going to be moving ahead? Are you still going to have a job in 2 months? Your personal relationships, your own health, right? There's just so many uncertainties in each of these areas of our life. And then on top of that, there's the micro level. So with each meeting you have, there's just this uncertainty if someone hasn't shown up in five minutes after the start time. Are they going to show up? Did I get the time wrong? Am I on the wrong link? Right? There's all these little uncertainties. And I think for any of us who text, those 3 little dots have become, right, the measure of uncertainty. What are they going to say? What are they going to say? And if you're having a tense conversation, those 3 little dots can really create a lot of anxiety. So that's the FAST trigger, future. The next one is about autonomy. Do I have control over what I do? And a lot of what's happened over the past year has really taken away a lot of our control, right? We have to work at home, or we have to stay off the subway, or there's so many things that we were used to doing and now we can't do them. So unilateral decisions taken by the government, taken by your business, maybe by your clients regarding deadlines, timing. There's all the unexpected changes. With schools going remote, for those of you who are parents with kids, the usual last minute meetings, things just popping up and you being dragged into them when you were planning to do something else. Being micromanaged, of course, is the epitome of not having autonomy. And then just that whole working from home, how that's changed your level of autonomy. Maybe you can't control the temperature, or you're not sure whether you're not going to be interrupted during a call. Maybe not even being able to control your internet, connection. So all these different ways that we can be triggered. And we're only through F and A. The next one is status. So what's my relative standing vis-a-vis the other person? And there are a lot of ways to be triggered here. So every time we meet with somebody, we're subconsciously comparing where we stand, and we do it in different ways. It might be through titles. It might be through where they went to school. If you're a startup, it might be whether they're funded, who funded them. If you're a small business, it might be, you know, what clients you have. So we're constantly gauging our status. And this is another way for us to be triggered when we sense that our status is lower. Also, just being wrong, making a mistake. One study showed that 83% of people, this was their top fear at work. It was making a mistake. And I'll explain the biology of that is because back when we were in tribes, living in tribes, depending for our survival on the tribe, if we made a mistake, if we said, hey, I think there's some food over there, and it turned out to be an enemy tribe, what happened? We were a liability to the tribe. We could get thrown out, and it was actually a question of survival. And so even though now making a mistake is not literally a survival threat, our brain and our body is still processing it that way. And that's why we have blame culture. Nobody wants to accept that they made the mistake or that they did it wrong. And we're constantly making sure that it's not us, that we didn't make a mistake. Another aspect of this is not knowing. Again, the brain likes to know, it likes to be able to predict and control what's going to happen. And so now what I've seen in the past year where there's so much uncertainty and not knowing, people just not making decisions because they don't know how to make the decision. And then an interesting one is receiving unsolicited feedback. So somebody may be coming to you with good intentions of how to help you, but what it actually does often is create a status trigger to the other person because there's this underlying message of, I know better than you, listen to me. And so they might feel that their status is lower. And let me just say, by the way, that I'm giving you these triggers as a way for you to understand what might be triggering you and also what might be triggering the people around you. And so how you might be unintentionally triggering others. Let me pause there, Chandler. Is there anything we need to address?
Yeah, we have some comments coming in.
Okay.
I think what I'll do just to like get a backlog of questions is as we work towards a session, I'll go ahead and comment ahead of time, hey, any questions? That way, because that's if I see any questions now, it might take a few minutes for someone to go in. So if you have a quick question, please go ahead and quickly drop it. If not, we will circle back.
Okay.
Saying, I would give a comment. They said exponential change is only going to make every year feel like 2020 as well.
Yeah. Well, this is the new normal that you keep hearing people talk about. So this is VUCA. The change is accelerating. And so, it's time. Part of resilience is really just accepting the way things are and not resisting them.
Yeah. Someone said, unsolicited feedback, so true. I had never seen it this way, but I felt it at some point in my career.
Yes. Yeah. So have you ever gotten an email where it said, we need to talk, right? Just that subject line can trigger things. And then if somebody says in the email, I have some feedback for you, very few people are going to interpret that as a positive. They're not going to say, oh, wow, that's great. They have some feedback for me. That almost never happens. So even the word feedback has become really loaded in our culture to become this trigger.
Do we have time for one question that came in, or do you want to go ahead?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So someone said, what do you recommend to take inventory of how well you respond to the fast triggers?
To take inventory. Well, so that's what you really want to be doing is becoming more aware of the triggers. So all these things are happening. You're being triggered here is to help you just be more aware. It's like if you were mountain biking and you just kept wiping out, or you just kept running into trees and you couldn't figure out why. And I want to explain to you at least the why. It may not help you avoid that, but at least you're going to understand why. And we're going to do a quiz in a moment that will help you practice identifying which triggers were involved. And so just by doing that, that's going to help you take inventory of where you stand, just by understanding what the triggers were.
Yeah, it sounds like a great segue to our next session. So I'd love to keep going.
Okay, let's do that. So the next trigger is tribe. Am I part of the group? And so there's always been a lot of ways to feel outside the group. And now that a lot of us are working from home remotely, there's even more of that. So there's more ways to feel excluded, misunderstood, or not included. So there's a thing like the introvert and the extrovert. Introverts can have a really hard time on Zoom calls, I think. Whether people are turning their videos on or off. Have you ever been on a call where there's only half the people have their videos on? And it feels like, oh, this group isn't really, sticking together. Parents versus non-parents, totally different experience of the pandemic. And then, I saw how international this group is, just dealing with teams from a different location, from a different culture. What's the main language everybody's using? If you're a non-native speaker, right off the bat, you might feel not part of the group. Unfairness is another aspect of tribe that can be really a huge trigger. This is a huge trigger for me. So even just walking outside, and seeing some people wearing masks and some people not wearing masks, constantly being triggered when I see people not following the rules, right, to keep us all safe. And then another big topic over the past year was just all the racism and the discrimination that we're seeing come to the surface, and how we're trying to address that in the workplace as well. Okay, so as you can see, there's a lot of potential triggers just under tribe alone. And again, I want to point out some of the neuroscience here. So when you feel excluded, or you feel like you've been abandoned, you're not imagining it if it feels painful, because your brain actually processes that perception in the same place that it processes physical pain. So if it feels painful to be left out of that meeting, to be left out of that conversation, to not get the joke, you're not imagining things. It actually is being processed as a real physical pain. And the last one is time, right? I'm pretty sure this resonates for all of us. Will I have enough? It feels like there's never enough time. So again, there's the macro level. Am I hitting the life goals, the goals for my business growth, my career? I think for a lot of us, the pandemic has kind of put a halt on all the goals and plans that we had. So that's feeling like a trigger. Then there's just deadlines, that feel really tight, and maybe you have multiple deadlines, and how are you going to get it all done? I know a lot of people have these back-to-back Zoom calls, which doesn't leave time to eat, to go to the bathroom, to even make it to the next Zoom call, or you don't have enough time to prepare. So you're preparing for the next meeting and the previous meeting, and there's just always a sense of not enough, not enough. And then again, with all the different cultural aspects. So, people see time differently in South America than they do in US. So in the US, you might say, I need that right away. And in South America, they might think that's next week instead of tomorrow. Or startups have a much different time frame than corporations do. So those are the fast triggers. I'll pause there, see if there's any specific questions to the fast triggers.
Yeah, we have one question. So someone's asking, they're excited about seeing this, and they're kind of asking like, why you think this isn't like common knowledge to like our learning and development as people? Like why did it take this long for
Yes.
knowledge to transcend to us?
Well, part of it is just how much we've learned about the brain over the last 10, 15 years. So we're understanding now. We can, hook people up to sensors and see what's happening in the brain when they feel threatened, for example. So that's been a big part of it, is just making the connection from a neurobiological standpoint. I do think that resilience should be taught in schools. And I love the scientific aspect of it, because it makes it so So concrete. It's not this sort of amorphous, vague thing. You'll see when we do the quiz that you can be very precise about what's triggering you, and that will help you determine how you want to behave. So I also want to point out that I call these the stealth triggers, because some of the things that I mentioned are big, but a lot of them are really tiny, right? Just that email subject line, somebody in a meeting rolling their eyes or folding their arms. So it's not something you're going to say, oh, wow, that's so stressful. But over time, they raise your cortisol 15%, and over time they accumulate. So they become a much bigger source of stress than the big things. And what they do is they deplete your energy. So we were already in survival mode before the pandemic. That was what I was seeing with my clients, with people, the people around me. So we were already at the limit. And then the pandemic just kind of pushed everything over the edge. So what happens is when you're not managing these stealth triggers, you don't have any surplus in the tank. The tank is empty. And so you don't have the ability to manage the big events when they come.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything to add to that? Or a question?
That's great. I want to make sure we have enough time to get to the quiz, and then
let's do it.
We'll have time for Q&A like throughout the rest of the presentation too as well.
Okay. So these stealth triggers are subtle, but they're still triggering survival reactions. And here's I'll say the final piece of bad news is we are in autopilot 95% of the time. The 50% was for the cortisol. So 95% of the time, we are operating our subconscious at a subconscious level. So we're taking in all this input, but not really processing it in a conscious way. And so we're taking in the stress, but not really understanding why. And so I hope just even understanding the fast triggers, that could be enough for you to start to feel less stress, because you would understand, oh, that's why I get so stressed when this person does this, or that's why that person reacts in that way when I do this. So just kind of having a little more situational awareness can give you a sense of control. And I think that's really what we all want, just to feel a sense of control. So let's do the fast quiz. I'm going to give you a situation, and you're going to type into the chat box which triggers they are. It could be more than one. So you can even just put in the first letter. So you don't get a reply from your colleague to the email asking for data info, so you can include them in your client report. Which trigger is that?
Looks like we have about 20 coming in for T or tribe. Yep. Or I guess that could be time, because if someone's saying T, they're saying time too as well. And now we have some coming in for
Oh,
time.
right. Sorry. Okay. So you might need to type out the T's. Yeah. So tribe, they're not being a great teammate. Time, are you going to be able to get your client report done? I would say future as well. There's uncertainty. Are you going to get the data? Did they get your email? Are they purposely ignoring you? There's just so much uncertainty around that. They've impacted your autonomy because you want to get the client report done so that you can work on something else, and now you can't. And then there's some status also. It's like, are they saying they're more important than you, that they don't have to give you the information you need when you want it? So this is all of them, right? Ding, 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 ding. Next one, you see a heated exchange on Slack between key employees. So two key direct reports, and you see that they're not getting along on Slack.
It's like a tie between tribe and future is coming in.
Yeah, I'm curious, what's the future trigger there? What's going on for you when you see that in terms of future? Tribe is obvious, right? They're not getting along, people in the tribe. What's the uncertainty there? If that person wants to.
just reading them out, potentially status or future, will one of them leave? How's this going to affect things?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've got a big delivery coming up. Are they going to focus on it? Again, I hope you're seeing how there's all these little uncertainties or all these triggers that are happening just every day, all day, right? And we're just used to it. It's become part of our normal day. But actually, our body is constantly processing these as survival events. Your spouse has an unexpected Zoom meeting again and asks you to look after the kids.
All right, got a few coming in, and they're coming in really quick. Looks like autonomy, time.
Mm-hmm.
One said status, or a couple said status.
Yeah,
Looks
status.
Like yeah.
Who in this marriage, you know, has a higher status, right? It makes you ask that question.
Absolutely.
People start turning off their camera in a Zoom call. Pretty common now, isn't it?
Yeah, make sure you're dropping this for the fourth one in the comments. And okay, looks like a toss up between or like equal. Some people are saying both status and tribe.
Yeah, it can definitely be more than one.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, there's uncertainty too. Are they still paying attention? Are they doing something else? Are they multitasking? You bring up an idea in a meeting for a potential solution and your client just rolls her eyes and says that will never work, but she doesn't explain why.
And this one looks like mostly status, one off for autonomy, one off for tribe, one off for future, status, status,
yeah.
future. Yeah.
Definitely status. Again, I would say there's some future here as well, right? If you bring up too many ideas that the client doesn't like, they might end the contract, right? So as you're seeing that there's a lot of nuance in here that you can really start to understand what's going on. Let's do one more. So you're on the marketing team and you're in a meeting with finance. This could be, you know, IT and sales. They start using lots of, let me go back. They start using lots of buzzwords and acronyms or technical language, and you're lost.
I see them coming in. I'm going to give it a few more seconds and I'll read them out. Okay. Pretty much all tribe, 15
yeah,
tribe.
Definitely tribe. Yeah. There's probably some status in there too, right? Yeah. Sometimes it's the one team knows that they have a higher or think that they have a higher position in the company, or they, you know, sales is the one bringing in all the revenue. So maybe they think they have a higher status. And there's also a bit of autonomy, right? Because if you're not understanding, then you have a sense of you don't have control over what you're doing. Now, should you be looking up some of these buzzwords? Should you ask a question? Again, there's a lot of nuance here. So here's kind of the first thing that you can do is start start identifying the fast triggers in your day-to-day. So I've noticed whenever I get upset about something, I'll step back and I'll say, wait a minute, which trigger was that? And just by doing that, I give myself some space. I get out of survival mode. And actually, I'm going to get into the recovery strategy. Okay. So again, as I was saying, we're on autopilot 95% of the time. So we are programmed. And so it's not going to be easy to change this behavior. So that first step, just having that awareness, that desire to change your normal conditioning is the first step. So what I usually do around this point in time is just do a one arm hug. You know, got to be kind to yourself. One arm hug each side. Take care of yourself. Been in survival more than you realize. And then something else I'll point out here for the business owners and the founders is your company may be in survival mode. You may only have, a few weeks left of runway, but you personally don't have to be. So I've seen this with the special operations, for example. They could be going into a lot. It's interesting. A lot of the times their vital signs go down. They get calmer because they feel a sense of control. They actually get more stressed when they're dealing with people, their spouse or their children, and they have all these fast triggers going on, and they can't fight. They actually have to use emotional intelligence and communication. So be sure to not conflate yourself with your company's state. All right, so let me just check in. We have a few minutes before Q&A, Chandler?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Do you want
All
to?
right, that was fast.
Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you want to take a question, or do you want to?
Is there a question about anything that we've already covered?
We have some general questions coming in. I'm looking to see if there's like one that specific to.
Off on those though.
Okay.
Let me go through the resilience strategy. There are 3 steps, and then we can kind of open it up.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Let's do that.
Okay. So the key word here is in each moment. You can't be resilient for the next year. You can't be resilient for the next 3 months. You can only be resilient right now. So that's the first key, is just really focus on this moment right now. And that's what I tell the Navy SEAL candidates who are going into Hell Week, where it's literally going to be hell for 4 or 5 days. Just focus on the current moment. So the first step then is you want to neutralize fight or flight. The second step is to zoom out. And the third is to create some kind of micro shift. So let me explain what I mean. So first you want to get out of that fight or flight mode, which isn't probably going to be appropriate in a workplace situation, in an interpersonal situation. So the first thing is just to take a deep breath. Now I know you've gotten that advice before, but here's why that's so powerful. Your brain, when it's in survival, do you remember what it does with the breathing? It has more shallow breathing. So if you take a deep breath, you're signaling your brain in a very physiological way, it's okay. We're safe. We're not in survival. And here's another one that will also work, is to wiggle your toes. So just try it now. Wiggle your toes. Takes a little bit of thinking. And again, there has never been a survival situation in the history of man where somebody saved their life by wiggling their toes. So when you wiggle your toes, you're signaling your brain, it's okay. We're not in danger. And the beauty of this is you can do it anytime. You can do it in a meeting and nobody's going to know what you're doing. The third piece is really powerful. This is a whole workshop in its own, but I just want to give you this little piece of information. Again, science is showing now that the heart is actually a brain in its own right. It has neurons, it's making decisions. And so what I have been teaching my clients is how to shift from the brain in the head to the brain in the heart. And how I do that is I just put my hand on my heart to remind myself, I'm safe. I can come from a place of compassion, a place of kindness. And it really can calm me down very, very quickly. And the science behind that is that the heart is a second brain. Both the brain and the heart are sending out electromagnetic waves, but the heart is sending out 5,000 times as strong a magnetic wave as the brain. And so it's way more powerful than the brain. And so again, they're not teaching this in school, but just think about that. The times when you've behaved well, when you've performed well under pressure, often it was because you put aside that survival brain and you tapped into that fuller, that more compassionate side you. If you do want to look at science behind this. Second step then is to zoom out. So now that you've interrupted or neutralized that fight or flight, now you want to zoom out. And you can say to yourself, I'm safe. You can play the game of which fast trigger was that, or number of triggers. And then I'll share with you what a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink says, what he does. So he has trained himself to be the observer, to zoom out and just kind of survey the whole situation. And so if he's in a conversation, he's asking himself, wait a second, am I getting too emotional right now? Am I losing control here? What's his reaction? Is my ego taking over here? So being able to zoom out and to kind of get a bigger picture, a more objective picture of the situation is really going to help you make different decisions in your conversations. Because I'll just say as a side note, a lot of the situations where we think we need resilience are because we're dealing with other people. And so if we can find a way to manage ourselves and those relationships, then the need for resilience could very well become less necessary, right? You're not saying things that make people mad. You're not upsetting people. You're not having to backtrack and fix old mistakes because you weren't in survival mode. And then the final one, so that's a little bit of what I'm talking about, is you want to create a micro shift, not try to make some huge change, just one tiny thing in this moment. So it might be something like pausing. It might just be saying, you know what, I'm feeling a little agitated right now. Let me just take a few minutes to calm down. Doing something differently than what you would do in that fight or flight reaction. And then just practice that, train that, try different things, experiment. The more you do it, the more you'll train that muscle so that you'll find that you're not saying the first thing that comes to mind. And so now you're going to feel a sense of control, and you're just going to feel like things start to move smoother and that you have more capacity to handle those things that are out of your control.
Thank you, Chandler, for handling our Q&A and the chat.
Nice, thank you.
Thank you so much, Renita, for sharing this extremely important knowledge with us today. I totally agree. This is something that everyone should learn in school. Team Leadership Academy, thank you for showing up for every single session. We really appreciate your energy and your feedback and you just showing up and being here with us. We'll be meeting again on Tuesday at noon Eastern time to kick off Module 2, which will be all about self-leadership. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend and see you on Tuesday. Thank you, Renita. You too have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.